Welcome. I'm Tracy Smith, and this is Here Comes the Sun, a closer look at some of the people, places, and things we bring you every weekend on Sunday morning. Even if you don't recognize producer Jack Antonoff, you probably know some of the catchy hits he's helped create for artists like Taylor Swift, Sabrina Carpenter, and his own band, Bleachers. With 11 Grammys, including 3 for Producer of the Year, Antonoff understands the greatest songs aren't manufactured, they're made with a touch of magic. During our chat in Los Angeles, he told me he always wants songwriting to feel like an adventure rather than a routine day at work.
You look at the story of any album, any song, no one's ever like, we planned that day to write the best song we've ever written, we got coffee when we went in, and we did it. And that's how that happened. It's always, the story is always like, so-and-so's plane was delayed, and I got kicked out of my hotel, because of some that this person did, blah, blah, blah. So I'm walking down the street, and I hear this, it's always this randomness, and that buzz is where it all comes from. And you just don't want to ever lose that. You never want to put yourself in a position as an artist where any of this feels normal.
Later in the show, Jack Antonoff on his viral songwriting video with Taylor Swift. There's that moment that has gone viral of Getaway Car, you and Taylor in the studio.
Yeah.
And it's magical, but I'm wondering from your perspective, why do you think people latched onto that?
I understand why that video became popular, and it's because it's the only video that I've ever seen of my process, and I haven't seen many just out there in the world where like the actual magic moment someone happened to be recording. So I understand why that video has reached a lot of people, because anyone who writes knows that moment and knows that it comes so rarely, and there's never anyone filming it.
Then Luke Burbank visits an unlikely exhibit for an art museum, an entire house. Built in 1931 as a home of the future for an architectural expo, the Aluminaire House is the latest addition to the Palm Springs Art Museum. Luke Burbank explores its nearly 100-year journey to its new permanent residence.
It's amazingly designed by Albert Frey, which we discovered partly in the process of taking it apart and putting it back together.
Schwarting and Campani used it as a learning tool for architecture students, but by 2012, Aluminaire was homeless again, disassembled, packed into a trailer, and put in storage.
That's all coming up right here on Here Comes the Sun. It's hard to believe Jack Antonoff, one of the most successful music producers working today, ever had a tough time being taken seriously. But he did. That is, until he started working with pop superstar Taylor Swift. Now he's a highly sought-after star in his own right. I sat down with him to reflect on his career, which he told me still feels surreal. For the last 18 months, Taylor Swift's Eras Tour conquered the pop music world. And in a show full of great moments, this one stood out. Cruel Summer, a song produced by Taylor Swift and her friend, Jack Antonoff. It's hard to overstate Antonoff's influence on pop music. He's written or produced some of the biggest songs with some of the biggest names in the business. Lana Del Rey, Sabrina Carpenter, The Chicks. But his career as a producer basically began when Taylor Swift decided that he was someone she wanted to work with.
I love that!
I think it's hard at this point to even imagine that there was a time that people didn't take you seriously as a producer. But I think you said in your last Grammy speech that Taylor was the one who kicked down the door for you.
Literally.
Literally?
Oh, well.
Figuratively.
Metaphorically.
Put the money in the bag and I sold the keys. That was the last time you ever saw me. Ah!
Yeah, it felt so validating. I was like, finally, someone hears what I hear and isn't afraid to just say, done. Press the records.
If you're feeling so.
He's been pressing a lot of records ever since. Besides his producing gigs, Antonoff is the lead singer and the soul of his band Bleachers. And he owns 11 Grammys,
Jack Antonoff.
including Producer of the Year in 2022.
Thank you guys so much.
He won it again
Sit in
in
the studio all day with
2023
Jack Antonoff.
and 2024.
Thank you so much.
These days, when he's not on tour, he often works from his studio in LA. He says a lot of it is just playing around, like the time he was on the synthesizer
It was right here.
and found the Bleachers' signature sound.
Home in New Jersey, my headphones on. I literally started going like started playing that. Started playing around with that.
That riff became Roller Coaster, one of the biggest songs yet for his band Bleachers. He's become a reliable fountain of hit music, but Antonoff says he never knows when the creative lightning is going to strike.
You look at the story of any album, any song, no one's ever like, we planned that day to write the best song we've ever written. We got coffee when we went in and we did it. And that's how that happened. It's always, the story is always like, so-and-so's plane was delayed and I got kicked out of my hotel, because of some shit that this person did, blah, blah, blah. So I'm walking down the street and I hear this, like it's always this randomness, and that buzz is where it all comes from. And you just don't want to ever lose that. You never want to put yourself in a position as an artist where any of this feels normal.
And frankly, there's nothing even close to normal about Jack Antonoff's life. Born and raised in New Jersey, Antonoff put his first band together in high school, but success came slowly. It took him a while to leave home. We went back there with him and Mom Shira in 2017. Until fairly recently, Jack lived here full time.
You didn't leave until you were...
29, and at that point, I had #1 records at that point.
He was back east again for a personal milestone.
Can you imagine these seats completely full, every single one?
His band was playing Madison Square Garden for the very first time,
No, most of the time I actually...
and the butterflies were
I have
kicking
such
in.
a level of, even if a show is sold out, I have such a level of surprise that doesn't get old.
And talk about milestones. His first Broadway show just opened. Antonoff did the music for the play Romeo and Juliet.
And then your second one is massive. That's great. Crazy thing about that show, when I think Romeo and Juliet, and I was doing this in music, I think about hope and love and finding something and running with it against all odds. I always forget about all the death. And so I started going back and sewing that into the score slightly. A slight, not knowingness, but hint that it's going to be horrible, because I forget.
His own love life is less troubled. Last year, he married actor Margaret Qualley.
The tiniest moves you make.
You might know that she's the daughter of actor Andy McDowell. You might not know that she directed and danced in the music video for the Bleachers song, Tiny Moves.
Got a bloodlust crisis of faith.
Where'd that idea come from, Margaret dancing?
That was Mark's idea. And it was the only video I've ever been a part of where I was like in it, but also witnessing it, and it was real magic.
Magic indeed. At 40 years old, married to the woman of his dreams, and possibly in line for a record 4th Producer of the Year Grammy, Jack Antonoff is on fire.
Does this all seem surreal to you?
Completely. And it continues to be surreal because one of the only promises of the work I do is how fleeting, not the performance, not the audience, but that kind of success is. So there's never a moment when I'm not like amazed by it all.
After the break, an exclusive excerpt from my chat with Jack Antonoff, something you can only see right here on Here Comes the Sun. Stay with us. As promised, here's more from my interview with Jack Antonoff.
My daughter and I both were amazed at how safe and comfortable you seem up there when there are all these thousands of people. It's almost in a sense, the way you move, like you're alone in your room.
Oh yeah. I like being around a lot of people. I think that's something that a lot of us share who do this. The at once ability to be with, share secrets to very large groups of people, and then on the flip side, be sort of oddly shy in
In a smaller
yeah
setting.
yeah. I think it's different for everyone, but one of the reasons I started writing music and touring was this sense of how lonely I felt and insular. It was almost like the only way to communicate was to do it in the most absurd way. I didn't feel like I was communicating on a personal level, so I just thought I'd like chuck out a bunch of messages and bottles, songs to the world.
To the world.
Yeah.
And man, did the world respond.
After some time.
After some
Yeah,
time.
the nice thing is I loved doing it the same always. What I love about my work on tour, on stage, as a songwriter, as a band leader, as a singer, as a producer, no matter how big it gets, the work is the exact same.
There's that moment that has gone viral of Getaway Car, you and Taylor in the studio.
Yeah.
And it's magical, but I'm wondering from your perspective, why do you think people latched onto that
I
so
understand
much?
why that video became popular, and it's because the only video that I've ever seen of my process, and I haven't seen many just out there in the world where like the actual magic moment someone happened to be recording. Because writing music and producing music and being in the studio, it's like a lot of this like weird like fishing. You're just like playing and you're trying things, and like a lot of times when I hear something that I'm blown away by, I'm not like, I'm just sort of like this, the wheel starts spinning in my head and I start moving quickly, and it's actually would be quite boring to look at, I think, because it's really all happening here. But that was one of the few moments where like this crazy kinetic writing, getting the part, two people like reading each other's minds, like she just happened to be recording. So I understand why that video has reached a lot of people, because anyone who writes knows that moment and knows that it comes so rarely, and there's never anyone filming it.
Yeah, it's so wild. And I
Yeah.
wonder, along those same lines, are you surprised sometimes when something becomes a hit?
No, I'm usually pleased. I mean, I'm not. I feel more like validated because like a lot of times things that work, I mean, I just love them, and I hear them a certain way. Yeah, I guess sometimes surprised. I'm surprised, I guess, how much hope people hear sometimes in sad things. And I guess sometimes I'm surprised how much sadness people hear in hopeful things. That's what surprises me. I'm not surprised like what gets popular or what doesn't. I can usually connect with what people are connecting. Like what people get from a song that I make that becomes popular. Like I'm not getting a terribly different thing. So I just feel in the community of people who love that song.
What do you think? I don't know if you can pin this down, but what's been the most surreal moment so far?
It's weird. My life, it's so hard for me to say. My life feels like so grounded and surreal on a daily basis. The studio and tour is so grounding to me. I feel a little surreal when I have that feeling that people know who I am. It's a very specific feeling, and you just go somewhere and people are very sweet everywhere in the world. That I've met, but no, like all the overtly surreal things aren't to me like like last night's show or example, like if that is a surreal environment to some people, like that's my home, those are my people, and I literally recognize their faces from so many shows. I am comforted by them. They know me. I know them. I go backstage. There's my family. They know me. I know them. But my life is quite sweet in that way.
Up next, a house of the future with a storied past. Welcome back. Architect Albert Frey is behind many of the modernist buildings for which Palm Springs, California is famous. And now his early creation, the Aluminaire House, is finally at home in the city he built. After being used as a weekend getaway and a learning tool for architecture students, it sat in storage for years. Finally, Aluminaire has found a permanent home at the Palm Springs Art Museum, which holds the largest collection of Frey's work. Here's Luke Burbank.
It was a sunny day at the Palm Springs Art Museum, and the locals had turned out to welcome a new resident.
For once in my life, I let my heart be, baby.
Or maybe new residents would be more accurate, because this feature of the art museum's permanent collection is actually a house that's been on a nearly 100-year journey to get here. Built in 10 days by architects Albert Frey and Lawrence Coker, the Aluminaire House, as they called it, debuted at New York's Architectural and Allied Arts Exposition of 1931.
This must have looked like a spaceship landed.
Yeah, well, it was amazing, really remained unlike anything else.
The big idea behind Aluminaire was to show you could build a house cheaply using prefabricated materials designed for the way people actually lived, with fewer walls, more attention to shared areas, and a blending of indoor and outdoor spaces.
It was an amazingly important moment for American architecture.
But as architect Francis Campani will tell you, like a lot of avant-garde ideas, Aluminaire House never quite caught on. In fact, there was just that one prototype, which ended up being sold for someone to use as a weekend home. Undeterred, designer Albert Frey decided to go west to Palm Springs, California.
What attracted him to this place was the idea of a blank canvas. The desert was a place that actually he could experiment with new forms of architecture.
Adam Lerner is the executive director of the Palm Springs Art Museum, which houses the largest collection of Albert Frey's work, including his private home, the stunning and austere Frey House 2.
He's a local hero. He's the Kurt Cobain equivalent for Seattle, or what Andy Warhol was to downtown New York. He's Palm Springs' greatest achiever.
But as Albert Frey was becoming the father of Palm Springs architecture, designing many buildings, including City Hall and this gas station, which is now a welcome center, back in New York State, his first big project, Aluminaire House, had fallen into disrepair and eventually into the hands of Francis Campani and her partner, architecture professor Michael Schwarting, in 1987.
It's amazingly designed by Albert Frey, which we discovered partly in the process of taking it apart and putting it back together.
Schwarting and Campani used it as a learning tool for architecture students, but by 2012, Aluminaire was homeless again, disassembled, packed into a trailer, and put in storage. A constant worry for Campani wherever she happened to be.
It was February, and the ice was on the plane, and they de-iced it 3 times. And I thought, we're going to be killed. And no one's going to pay the bill for the storage. And the people at the storage yard are going to say, what's this pile of aluminum? And they're just going to throw it away.
Thankfully, that didn't happen. What did, though, was the seed of an idea. What if they brought Aluminaire House out to the city its creator, Albert Frey, loved so much? Enter architect and preservationist Leo Marmol.
The vertical structure is aluminum. The horizontal structure, floors and a roof, is steel. All of that is original. So the entire structure is from 1931.
There were, of course, modifications that had to be made, like adding a cooling system so the house didn't melt in the Palm Springs heat. And as of right now, only the outside of the home is open for viewing. But still, here it is, Albert Frey's vision of a different way to live.
Are you relieved that this thing is here? Can you sleep better at night?
Yes, yes. For a long time we were in limbo. We didn't know where we were going. So we're very, very relieved.
Sure, Aluminaire House might have failed in terms of never being mass-produced, but Leo Marmol says it succeeded at something else very important, getting people to rethink the idea of residential architecture, something it's still doing to this day.
This is about continuing the very significant conversation around modernism here in Palm Springs.
I'm Tracy Smith. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here next time on Here Comes the Sun.